Well, good evening, Wine Society members. We're on, as you know, our second virtual tasting, and I'm just going to run you through the format of the evening, just in case anybody's out there who hasn't who done the virtual tasting before. So we're going to do three wines. We're going to do two wines to start with. We're going to have a 10-minute break, then we're going to do a third wine. We're then going to have a caption competition between the taste as well, which is a very interesting photograph. And then we're going to have a summing up at the end. But just to keep you updated with what the Wine Society Committee has been doing over the shutdown, we've been particularly busy, and we've put together the Selborne Wine Society website, which is now up and running, and we'll be sending it out to you in the next newsletter. Gareth has done a fantastic job for us, and I'm sure when you go onto it and log onto it, you'll see everything you need to do with links to all of our suppliers and all of our presenters. So without further ado, I'll pass across to Roger, and we can get the evening cracking.
Hi, evening, Ian. Everybody. How you doing, Ian? You enjoying being back with the land employed?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Working's not good for you.
Ian, while I've got you here, there was one thing I was going to ask. Obviously, last time I handed over the bottle of red, I think you still owe me a tenner for it. Things getting a bit tight this end. Unfortunately, the shops are open and Shirley's got the credit card again. So I was just wondering whether, while we're here, we could square up.
Yeah, certainly, Roger. Here you go. There you go. There you go. Okay. Here we go. Okay.
Right. Well, hang on, Ian. That's a fiver. That's not a tenner. That's a fiver. I know Maltby's are printing their own money, but
the hand is faster. The hand is faster than the eye.
I think it's probably got to do with the slow download speed.
Pass it back, Roger. Pass it back, and I'll see what I can do.
Right. There you go.
Oh, it's magic, Roger. Thanks very much. Perfect.
Story of my life. Thanks, Ian.
Over to you, Roger.
I'll see you soon. Well, that didn't work. Well, good evening, and yeah, we've got another cracking tasting for you this evening. How could we follow last night with another of our regular presenters and a good friend of the Wine Society, Alistair Gibson from Hermitage Cellars. For those of you that don't know Alistair, quick run through of your history, Alistair. I'm afraid this is a bit like This Is Your Life. Alistair actually is a local lad. Grew up in Emsworth, just down the road, Hampshire boy, and grew up in a hotel, and that's where I think you first found out about hospitality and learnt the ropes. But I understand it was South Africa where you got your first love of wine in the Stellenbosch area, working in a hotel, and from there coming back to the UK, that's grown, and from that Hermitage Cellars has come along. So yeah, it's not only that. I know you're a wine journalist as well, and I believe one of the write regularly for the Portsmouth News. I've had to say, Alistair, I think that has to be one of the best jobs going, where you travel the world, taste wine, and then tell everybody else what they're missing. Yeah, that sounds.
Somebody's got to do it, Roger.
Someone's got to do it. So, and Alistair also does many tastings. In fact, he's done tastings for the likes of Jensen Button and, of course, the prestigious Selborne Wine Society. In fact, last year, I think our 20th anniversary, Alistair was unfortunately affected by the fact that it was a year ago this month that half of Selborne had gone on holiday. I don't know if the members can remember that holiday where you pack all your stuff in a case and get on a plane and travel. Well, that won't be happening. But yeah, it was, for me, one of the, I'm sure there'll be some nodding heads out there of the people that were there last year. It was one of the best thought out and actually quite an emotional tasting. It was apart from the wine, so it was a very lovely evening. So I know that this evening you're going to all in for a great time. So, right, and you're presenting from over the water today. I take it you didn't need your passport to go to the Isle of Wight?
No, I am. This is yes. This is. I'm on the South Island, and you know, you guys are on the North Island, and you know, so.
So is that
So
are you
yeah.
looking for a permanent move to the Isle of Wight, Alistair, or is that just a...
Yeah, that's certainly the direction it's going in. Yeah, it's
Okay,
a
well,
lot warmer down here, Roger.
right, well, I can understand. I have to say that I know that Chris Scarrett has been out looking to buy a rowing boat because he's a bit worried that he's going to have to row across the water to get his weekly supplies. But it sounds like he might need to look a little bit harder. So, yeah. Great. Well, I shall pass over to you. If everybody would like to get the rosé ready, and I hope you've got your canapes ready for the first wine. I'll hand over to you, Alistair, and take it away. Questions. Don't forget to put your questions up, and anything you want to ask Alistair, we'll throw it up at the end of each session. So use the web page, put your questions on. I can see some of you are on there already. Take it from there. Thanks, Alistair.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Ian, and behind the scenes as well. Thank you, Nick. I don't know if everyone knows Nick, but Nick is the man who is controlling all this technology. I was thinking about it earlier. I don't think I've ever been counted in to a wine tasting before. So, Nick, thank you for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I was only 7 when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, but it kind of felt a bit like that, really. So, thank you, Nick. From my home to yours, I suppose. This is the sign of the times we're living in. Strange times for all of us. And this is certainly the new norm, to be a little bit cliche currently. You are certainly the first wine tasting I've given on this scale to a group of people. I've been privy to take part in wine tastings around the world during lockdown from winemakers in far-flung places, but this is the first time I've given one myself on this scale. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's always been a pleasure to come to Selborne. You're a wonderful group of people, and I'm only sorry that I can't see you all and sort of interact with you more, really. But I'll do my level best. I've got to say that this evening has been one of the most difficult wine tastings in terms of the content that I've ever had to do. I was given a brief. We're going to be here for an hour and a half, or give or thereabouts, and 3 wines. And you know, how do you choose 3 wines that A, appeal, and B, tell a story, and C, hopefully you'll like. So it was really difficult, and my natural instinct is normally to go off piste a little bit and show wines that either you know, are a little bit out there, maybe not the sort of the norm, certainly not sort of the. I mean, I can't remember the last time I showed a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, for example, but we do have one this evening. So I've tried to again tell wines that tell a story. I hope I can wrap some stories around them. And I, most importantly though, I fully appreciate that, you know, we've got an hour and a half together, or virtually, and I hope you enjoy what we're about to do. I hope you've all, or some of you have made some canapes. I hear that Roger's dog ate half of his canapes, so if you've got any spare canapes, you could throw them Roger's way. And I hope you just have an hour and a half where we can enjoy wine, enjoy each other's company-ish, and maybe forget about some of the rest of the world, really. So my sort of thing this evening, the theme was wines to be isolated with. We've got 3 wines. One of your members, actually, I'm going to nick his joke now. But he actually said to me, Alistair, you've got the perfect name for a wine company during sort of a lockdown or isolation, because actually you could turn your name to Hermit Cellars. So yes, I suppose I have been sort of the hermit. We've all been a hermit, haven't we? So welcome to my world, everybody. We've got 3 wines. we've got a rosé, we've got a white, and we've got a red. And the theme really that I was trying to come across with was certainly with the rosé was rosé has been unbelievably popular during the lockdown, during this whole sort of pandemic in terms of wine sales. We've been lucky, the weather's been very nice, loads of people have got gardens, and rosé has been absolutely the has just flown off the shelves. So sort of the title there was the wine that nobody could have got through lockdown with. Provence rosé is a phenomenon, really. It's been the most extraordinary thing over the last decade. Rosé used to be this sort of frivolous, flirtatious thing that people did in the summer, but now it's altogether much more serious. But I wanted to show you a rosé, so you should hopefully most of you have got this wine in front of you now. So this is not from Provence. Let me try that again. Oh, there we go. This is Mount Rocher rosé. It's from the Languedoc. So it's a Van de Pay Doc. So that's that huge sort of spread of land that almost goes all the way from the Spanish border up to almost to Marseille along the south coast of France. So Van de Pay Doc. The grapes itself for this wine come from the Roussillon area, which is nearer the Spanish border end. It's made from a grape variety called Sanso. Now, Sanso is not a grape variety that you see very often as a grape on a label. You very rarely see a producer advertising the fact that his wines are made from Sanso. Bizarrely, with the exception of South Africa, where it's suddenly becoming quite trendy again. Sanso is a grape variety that is very much at home in the south of France. In the days of sort of Mass Plonk, which is what the south of France was known as for a long time, Sanso is a grape that produces not particularly distinguished red wines, but it does have the ability to produce quite a lot of them. So it has a high yield. Perhaps its most famous sort of place in history, if you like, is it is half of the grape that makes up Pinotage. So Pinotage is a South African grape variety you maybe all have heard of, you might have drunk, you might not even have liked. A lot of people don't like it, but Pinotage is a cross of two different grape varieties, Pinot Noir and Sanso, and hence Pinotage, it gets its name from that. Sanso was known in South Africa as a grape variety as Hermitage, so that's why Pinotage. So Pinotage is half of Sanso, if you like. So the first thing to notice about this wine is the colour, and because of Provence rosé, everybody has to drink pale rosé. Pale is the new black, so to speak. So a lot of rosés these days are made in a style similar to Provence. So very pale. Rosé is made. There's basically two ways you can make rosé. There's the easiest way to make rosé is you get a bottle of red wine, you get a bottle of white wine, and you get a jug, and you pour them in together. Now you might be laughing at that, at least I hope you are anyway, but that is how some very, very cheap rosés are made. You literally blend white and red wine together and make rosé. Ironically, rosé champagne is actually made in that way, is that normally pink champagne is made of 95% white wine, sparkling white wine, with the addition of some red wine from the Champagne area. But that's the only example I can think where a quality rosé is made in that way. The best way to make rosé is it's made from red grapes in the main. You take your grapes back to your winery, you crush them very gently, and you macerate the skins with the juice for a very brief period of time. So red wine is made by crushing your grapes and macerating the juice and the skins together for a period of time, 10 days, 2 weeks, sometimes even longer. And all the colour comes out of the skin, because that's where all the colour is in grapes, and that's how you get red wine. So for rosé wine, the best way to make rosé, and certainly Provence rosé, and definitely this rosé here, is made by crushing the grapes very lightly, allowing the juice and the skin to sit together, to macerate together for a couple of hours, and the juice then takes on this slight, very pale tinge, and then it is made in the same way as white wine. So this wine has been made with, it's basically the juice is separated from the skins after a couple of hours, the juice is taken away, put into stainless steel tanks, there's no oak involved here, and then the wine is fermented, it goes through a fermentation at very cool temperatures. Everything is about, in rosé and this type of style of rosé, everything's about freshness, about keeping the fruit. So fermented in stainless steel. Once it's fermented, it's allowed to settle. This is from the as you can see, it's from the 2019 vintage. So it's last year. One of the rules of thumb about rosé is always drink the youngest available. So if you find on a wine merchant's shelf, 3 bottles of 2016 Provence rosé, please don't think you're getting a bargain, because it would have lost all its fruit, all its freshness. Rosé is about vitality, about freshness, and about the fruit that you get. So this is 100% Sanso, aged in stainless steel. As I said, it's I don't want to underline it too much really, but it's all about the freshness. On the nose, you're going to get sort of hopefully very vibrant, fresh fruit. Sort of, to me, there's sort of red currants, almost a little bit of wild strawberry, and crushed red fruits. And then there's just this little bit of lick of sort of lime citrus fruit at the back, maybe a little bit of spice, but only a very little, if at all. But just very, very fresh. I mean, in essence, this is almost white wine. So lovely fresh nose, lots of vitality, and then on the palate, it's very crisp, it's very fresh. It's still got that sort of crushed red currant fruit. Lots of acidity, but not too much acidity. The acidity there is it's just about keeping the freshness and about keeping the appeal. It's supposed to be refreshing. It's supposed to make you want to come back for another glass of it, which is precisely what this does, I think. Rosé to me is about, without being too cliche, but is about long lunches in the south of France. Well, we're not in the south of France, but long lunches with plates of pâté and charcuterie and salads. I have no idea how many of you have made any sort of food to go with this at all, but rosé is one of the wines that actually works really well with tomatoes, for example. Tomatoes are actually quite difficult to match wines with. So I just think that this is, and I would say this obviously, but I think this is great value. I think it's fresh. It's a wine for the moment. I'm not too sure I'd drink it in the middle of January, but right now, although actually I've got to be honest with you, it is raining now as I speak to you on the tropical Isle of Wight. But it is a wine. It is a wine of the moment. It's almost difficult not to like. I mean, I'll throw it at you now. I defy anyone not to like it. Really, it can't actually create enough sort of feeling to dislike it. Really, it's also a rosé, and I can't believe I'm just about to say this, but it's also a rosé that if you really, really want to, I will allow you to throw some ice into. I do have a bit of an issue with people throwing ice into white wine and rosé, because all you're doing is watering it down, really. But I read something in the Sunday Times, or the Saturday Times, I think it was, a few weeks ago, and the Jane McQuitty, the journalist who writes for the Saturday Times, said that she did her best 20 rosés of summer or whatever, and she basically said any rosé under £8 you were legitimately allowed to throw ice cubes into. So I guess if you really must, this is the type of wine that you could throw ice cubes into. Okay, so there we go. That's Mount Rocher Rosé, 2019. Again, I don't wish to emphasise this. I don't want to emphasise it, more, but it really is important. Drink the youngest available rosé. lots of freshness. From the grape variety Sanso, you don't see that very often as a variety. In fact, Ian asked me earlier, it's not on the label. Interesting enough, this wine, if we've been doing this last year, this wine was made from Grenache, but they decided to make it from Sanso this year because Sanso it's much fresher. It's got keener fruit, and I think they've done a really good job with this wine. At which point, I suppose, Roger, we ought to see if there are any questions and anyone's got anything to throw at us, really.
Well, it would appear, Alistair, there's been a lot of drinking going on in the meantime, but there are some questions coming through here. In fact, I've got one from, a bit technical, this one, from Shirley Hart. So since the skins are left in for such a short space of time, if it was done as a white wine and they were taken out straight away, does it affect the flavour much? Would the white wine taste the same as the rosé apart from the colour?
That's a really good question, Shirley, and thank you for that. So the first thing to say is you can make white wine from red grapes very easily. And the best example I can give you of that is Champagne. So the three grapes that are used in Champagne, or the main three grapes, are Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. Now, two of those grapes are red, and you can get Champagne that is purely made from Pinot Noir, and it's white. So, in other words, if you just crush your grapes, put the skin over there, and the juice over there, you just get white juice. It's as simple as that. By allowing the skins to be in contact with the juice, as in this wine here, yes, you are picking up some of those some of the flavour profiles from the skins. But it's more about most of the flavour profile comes from the juice itself as opposed to skins. What you get from the skins is you get tannins, which we're not getting in here because obviously it hasn't been in contact with the skins for very long. So yes, there is a little bit of flavour profile that comes from the skins, but it's mainly about the grape's characteristics. Just before I hand back to Roger, the best example I can give you of that actually is Pinot Gris, or Pinot Grigio rather, should I say, with the same grape variety. But Pinot Grigio, if you've ever seen a Pinot Grigio grape, it actually is pink. It's not white at all. But most Pinot Grigio that you've seen, of course, is white. But the grapes do look, and they can vary actually from quite dark pink to sort of a paler version of that.
Great, thanks, Alistair. Paul Corser wants to make you feel a bit better, and he said it's raining in Upper Selborne too. So I think it's raining in Lower Selborne as well. But yeah, there we go. So you're not on your own in the article.
If I could just interject there, I had no idea that Selborne had an upper and a lower. There we are. So thank you for that.
You'd be very surprised what Selborne has. Right, another question here from Kate Maltby. What's your opinion on the trendy rosés like Whispering Angel?
Oh dear. So I Provence rosé, as I said earlier, is an absolute phenomenon in the wine trade. Whispering Angel has almost become Provence's version of Cloudy Bay, heaven forbid. And the wine, is it good? Yeah, it's okay. Is it worth that money? No, quite definitely not. Has it opened up the market? Yes, quite clearly. Some years ago, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt bought an estate in Provence called Chateau Miraval, and they have really set the scene for what's going on now in Provence. There are film stars, rock stars, pop stars, rappers, whatever, buying up, estates to make Provence rosé with it. It is extraordinarily popular and successful. But what is really happening is that for example, I wrote about and tasted yesterday a Provence style rosé made in Tuscany by one of Tuscany's oldest wine producers, really well known for their Chianti, and they're now making a rosé out of Sangiovese, making it very pale in the Provence style. So the question was: Is Whispering Angel worth its money? No, it's not. Is it a fashion accessory? Yes, it is. Does it look good on people's dinner tables? Well, I suppose in the old days when people could see you at dinner tables, then yes, I suppose it did. But there are lots more other rosés out there now that a bit like Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, which we're about to move on to in a minute, which are producing just as good wine without the cult fashion accessory label.
That's great, Alistair. Well, I have to say that was a hit with me. This one, it's a lovely rosé. So thank you for that. So we'll move on to the white now, and what we're going to do is we're going to give you a couple of seconds just to sort yourselves out and get your new canapes through and get the screw top off. You don't need your corkscrew for that, by the way, and get yourself settled down for the next wine. So whilst you're moving around and clearing things about, it's been left to me to sit here and fill in. So I thought I'd talk about something that no one's even bothered about or interested in. The AGM hasn't got wine involved with it, so why would we? But just to let you know, we did hold, as you will know from the last newsletter, the AGM on Monday. Thank you to the people that dialed in and helped us get over the quorum line. But unfortunately, the committee got voted in again for another 12 months. Someone had glued our hands down. So there we go. The financial situation is looking good. Is very stable considering what's going on around us. Greatly helped, I think, by the fact that Treasurers managed to get a refund on our holiday flights because they were cancelled. But yeah, so everything is good in the house there. So, right, if you are hopefully settled down and got those white glasses out now, we can switch back to Alistair. So, I'm going to pass it over to you, Alistair. We'll move on to the next wine, and looking forward to this one too. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roger. I'm sitting here. I wish I could see you all, and I wish we could interact a bit, and I wish that I could pace up and down the hall in Selborne like I normally do in between the two tables, and I wish you could throw things at me. I don't mean literally, but I you know what I mean. Oh, there's something thrown at me. But we can't. So that's where we are right now. I said earlier I had to really think about what I was going to show this evening, what I wanted to taste with you, and I find it quite difficult. Not difficult, but I can't remember, as I said earlier, the last time I showed a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc to me, has become a kind of bit of a love it or hate it wine, really. I think the first thing to say about New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is I can still remember exactly where I was, exactly who I was with, and exactly what I was eating the first time I ever tasted Cloudy Bay Sauvignon Blanc. And it was in 1987. It was in Emsworth. It was at the Brookfield Hotel, which at the time was my family business. I was in the right place, the right time, and I managed to get hold of a couple of cases of the first vintage to hit the UK. So the first vintage was actually, I can't remember if I'm honest with you, whether it was 85 or 86. It was only on the domestic market, and then the subsequent vintage was the first vintage to arrive on these shores. And the wine press was completely blown away by it, and I promise you I can still remember that flavour, and it was like unlike anything I'd ever tasted before. And if ever there was a wine, forget Whispering Angel, but if ever there was a wine, in my opinion, that has changed the way we drink in this country, it was Cloudy Bay Sauvignon Blanc. And New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc literally became phenomenal. If Provence Rosé is phenomenal, then New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, Marlborough in particular, Sauvignon Blanc is absolutely a phenomenon. To the point where, if I'm completely honest with you, I'm bored of it. I am totally bored of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, which is not a great sales pitch, really, is it? As I stand here or sit here with this bottle in my hands. It is a wine that it has become, and excuse my French now, almost become bastardized. It's many examples live on reputation. A lot of the wine in supermarkets, on the supermarket shelves, own label stuff in particular, has been made to a recipe. It's become very formulaic. A lot of it has a lot more residual sugar in than you would probably think, because they're trying to cover up the sort of the over too much acidity in the wine, etc. But this is a wine that I've dealt with for and sold for a long time. I sell it to restaurants primarily. It's a wine that I don't taste very often, because it sells, and it's not really, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc isn't my style. If I was going to drink Sauvignon Blanc, if I'm honest with you, I'd head to the Loire Valley, or I'd head to some of the cooler regions in South Africa, because I think South Africa, and I think I've shown that at tastings in Selborne, sort of sits halfway geographically between Marlborough and the Loire Valley. But this wine, the 2019 vintage, suddenly started to win quite a lot of sort of plaudits and get a lot of press comments, and was entered into quite a few wine competitions around the world, and started to win the odd gold medal. And I thought, oh, I really must dig out, and re-taste. So this is from cue the sound effect now. There you go. No screw needed. This is from the 2019 vintage, the Crossing Sauvignon Blanc. It's from a sub-region in Marlborough called the Awatara Valley, and it's the southernmost region. I don't know how many of you, I'd love now for somebody to say, yes, I've been in Marlborough, but of course I don't know that. But I'm assuming some of you might have been. It's the southernmost region of the Marlborough region. It's a riverbed. It's very gravelly, it's very stony, and it's an area where it's a little bit cooler because it's a bit more southern. You get a lot more mineral influences from the riverbed, from the stony soil, etc., etc. And again, a bit like the Mount Rocher Rosé that we've just had, this is a wine that's been made without any oak influence. So Sauvignon Blanc, you literally pick it at optimum ripeness, you get it back to the winery, you crush it, you take the skins away from the juice, you take the juice into a stainless steel tank, you ferment it, and frankly, you bottle it. It's not a difficult wine to make. I just think that this wine has, it's got that sort of the passion fruit, the tropical fruit that we all recognise. It's one of the most instantly recognisable wine styles in the world, and the most. People think that this is what Sauvignon Blanc smells like now, because this is Oz Clarke once famously said that the quintessential Sauvignon Blanc now comes from Marlborough as opposed to the Loire Valley, and I think he's probably right. So there's passion fruit, there's a little bit of gooseberry at the back, there's a little bit of pineapple, there's a bit of minerality, and then you take a taste. And it's what I like about this wine is it's still dry. It's got nice fruit, but it is dry. Now, I'm sure there's some of you saying, well, there's a lot of fruit there, but just because it has fruit doesn't mean that it's sweet. It's fruit, but the finish is dry. The acidity is it's nice acidity. That sounds strange, isn't it? Nice acidity, but it's ripe acidity. It's rounded. Wine to me is all about balance. You've got to have the balance in white wine of fruit, of sweetness, and of acidity. And if those get out of balance, then that's when one starts to dominate, and it's just not a nice thing. So Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc should have all of those things in check, in balance. So again, it opens up a little bit in the glass actually quite nicely as well. But you definitely get those. To me, there's a bit more sort of grapefruit now coming through, some sort of pink grapefruit, and there's a characteristic that I often get in good quality New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, which is, for those of you who grow tomatoes at home, sort of tomato stalks, or the leaf of tomatoes, particularly the underside of a tomato plant. It's just starting to come through. Um, and it's zesty and it's mouth-watering. There's no residual sugar on the end there. It's dry finish, nice crunchy acidity. I don't know if that makes sense, but crunchy acidity it's just there, and it makes you can, once you've swallowed it, you can feel that there's this mouth-watering sort of sensation, and makes you want to come back for another glass of wine. I always think Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc is not an easy food wine. I think Loire Sauvignon Blanc is a much more food-friendly wine, but I do think this would go really nicely with, the last of the English asparagus, if you can still find it, particularly grilled asparagus. I think just a sort of plain asparagus salad maybe. This would be too much, but something grilled, maybe with some butter sauce, or even something like a poached egg, or some crispy Parma ham, that type of thing would work really, really well with this. I do think it's I think it reminds me of why we all fell in love with New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc in the first place, and it's got balance, and that's, to me, that's what wine is all about. It's not natural, it's not funky, it's not organic, it's not biodynamic. It hasn't been picked, with a full moon and a herd of cattle in the background. It's very modern winemaking, but it works very, very well. I don't know if we've got some questions there, Roger.
Oh, well, yes, there's a few coming through here, actually, Alistair. So let's see where we're going. And the first question is Peter Lewis Jones. It says, "Are you driving? Because with such good wine, why use a spittoon?" We'll move on.
Well,
good feedback.
Let me answer that question, but I was thinking about this earlier. Most wine tastings I obviously do, I have to drive home afterwards, so I use a spittoon all the time. It's force of habit. I always do it, but I have had at least 2 mouthfuls of wine. So come on.
Well, as part of Selborne, obviously, you're allowed to. So there we go. Right, Chris and Lynn put a question up. Alistair, what happened to Dashwood, which followed Cloudy Bay as a cheaper but equal alternative? Are you aware of what happened with that?
I am. I used to sell Dashwood. Dashwood was actually a sub-label of a winery called Vassavor, I think. To the best of my knowledge, it no longer exists. It might exist on the internal market in New Zealand. I don't know. It doesn't exist here. It was just the label. I'm sure the main winery was called Vassal. Producer was called Vassavor. As in wine regions all over the world, there's a lot of takeovers. There's a lot of secondary labels. Wines disappear, new wines appear. If you take Cloudy Bay, for example, so David Honan, who started Cloudy Bay, he was an Australian, came from Margaret River, had a winery out there called Cape Mentel, founded Cloudy Bay. In the early 1990s, David sold out to Veuve Clicquot, and so Cloudy Bay became part of the Veuve Clicquot empire, who in turn are part of the LVMH empire. So that is Veuve Clicquot, Moet, Dom Perignon, Krug, etc., etc. And then David Honan left, set up another winery back in Western Australia. The winemaker from Cloudy Bay went on to establish his own winery. So wines change all the time, labels change all the time, producers change all the time. Dashwood, if I'm honest with you, I've no idea even if it exists anymore.
Fantastic. Well, Nicky O'Donnell says this has really refreshed your enthusiasm for Sauvignon Blanc. after she become bored with it, the same as you. So there we go. I have to say, your choice of fish cakes, absolutely spot on. Went down a treat with it. So that was one of the campaigns that sold, didn't
the dog didn't get the fish cakes then, Roger? No.
No. Well, it's a Spanish rescue dog, and he ate the chorizo. So there we go. Right. So Kate Maltby's asked: is there a good temperature to drink this wine at? The wine, not the weather.
God, wine temperatures. Okay, so I think. God, where do we start? Wine temperatures. Yes, I think Sauvignon Blanc, this style of Sauvignon Blanc, definitely in the fridge, 2 hours. A domestic fridge in the fridge, 2 hours. That's the right temperature. I'm not going to say the temperature, but I think or in an ice bucket, with water and ice for 20 minutes. That's the temperature. I think Sauvignon Blanc is a wine style that I don't actually. No, let me start that again. Different white wines need different temperatures, in my opinion. So Sauvignon Blanc tends to be one of the wine styles you drink slightly colder. Chardonnay, on the other hand, needs to be slightly warmer, or slightly less cold would be the better way of describing it. So what happens with any wine, red, white, rosé, whatever, the more you chill it, the more it goes like this. It like we do. If it's cold outside or we're cold, we go like this, and we sort of we keep all that warmth in. And what happens with wine is if it's too cold, it clams up and keeps some of the flavours in. So there's my own personal opinion in this country is we drink white wine too cold and red wine too warm. I would always do it a couple of degrees either higher or lower than the recommendation. But certainly this wine in the fridge, a couple of hours, domestic fridge for a couple of hours. You want it cold, but you don't want it ice cold. This isn't a wine to throw ice cubes in, please.
Well, on the same sort of line, Alistair, Nick has asked, you mentioned to drink rosé young. Would you do the same with Sauvignon Blanc?
Yeah, I think, Nick, I would. In the main, again, it does depend, but generally speaking, New World Sauvignon Blanc generally, there's always the exception rule, but New World Sauvignon Blanc generally drink youngest available. Certainly the cheaper end of the scale. Loire Sauvignon Blanc, Sancerre, Pouilly Fumé can develop, definitely, but it's not a wine for long aging. Definitely, if rosé is to drink here now, the youngest vintage, I think in the main cheaper New World Sauvignon Blanc, particularly sort of South American Sauvignon Blanc, drink the youngest available. The Loire Valley, a couple of years it can develop. Is this wine going to develop? No, it's not. I have drunk older vintages of some Marlborough Sauvignon Blancs. I've actually at home. I've got some older vintages of Cloudy Bay from the 90s, and I do dig one out occasionally. But it's purely because it's purely because I'm interested. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily any good. This is a wine style that is to drink here and now. It's not going to get any better. No, it is the answer to your question.
Thanks. And the last question we've got, I think, let's just check. Yeah, we're fine there. So the last question is from Ian. So you've got to say yes or no. You can't sit on the fence. Would you go for a New World or an Old World Sauvignon Blanc if it was your choice, and why?
I'm going to... Okay, so here's the answer to your question. The best answer to your question is, what am I drinking now, Sauvignon Blanc-wise? What's in my fridge? That's a great game. What's in your fridge? So what's in my fridge currently is a South African Sauvignon Blanc from an estate called Iona, which I think I might have shown to the society a time before. For everyday drinking, I prefer. I find New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc just too much. I'm bored of it. Although this is, oh, hold on here, I can do this. My middle son got married last August, and we served Iona Sauvignon Blanc at the wedding, because I think it manages to combine a bit more elegance and a bit more balance of a Loire Sauvignon Blanc with just a little bit more fruit, so it's a little bit more crowd friendly. If I was sitting down for dinner with some really nice food, then I would probably go down the Sancerre Pouilly-Fumé route. So if I just sat on the fence, and shall I dig out some splinters from my backside or not?
Great. Well, thanks, Alistair. That's 2 down and 1 to go. We're going to take a short break now, short 10-minute break for everybody, just to do the normal breaks that we do in a short break and get everything ready for the red. When we come back, Ian's going to be back, and he's going to take us through the competition. And before that, I think Alistair's going to give us a perspective from his point of view of what's happened in the business over the lockdown. Now, obviously, last tasting we heard from Simon Evans, who was mainly a retailer with 3 shops. As you've heard, Alistair was mainly a wholesaler to the restaurant trade. So be interesting to hear what his story has been over the last 3 months. So 10-minute break, and see you on the other side. Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody's suitably refreshed and the queue's gone down for the toilet facilities, as they say. But right, just a few comments coming through here, just to follow up on the first two wines. Auntie Trish Roberts says this is lovely and better than the rosé. So well, there we go. We're taking sides already. But in the Goslings, there's a bit of a Gracious Street problem coming here. Grace prefers the rosé, so that's 50-50. Dear, Paul Corso, so good. He's rushed out to check how much spare space I have in my wine rack. You might need to get rid of that offer at the end, Alistair. There we go. It's yep, and the Hart household, which I think we do agree, is that we miss Alistair walking up and down the floorboards as well in the village hall, and we miss everybody else. So
I miss you too.
here we go. So we're now going to move on to just a little chat about the state of the industry, or the state of, really, I suppose, of Alistair's world, and what's happened over the last few months, and I suppose where he sees it going. So if you've got any questions you want to ask, thoughts on where everything's going and what's going to be good for the future in the industry, then please stick them online, and I will pass them on at the end. But Alistair, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, so I think the first thing that we've all lived through quite extraordinary times, without a shadow of a doubt. If Roger's actually right, I was with you. Those of you who weren't on holiday, obviously, this time last year, and who would have thought that 12 months later, here we are now. So from a very personal perspective, from my mountaintop view perspective, the restaurants and hotels were closed on the Friday night, if you remember, before lockdown, or shut down. And my trade, I'm a wholesaler by trade, but I'm not a journalist, and when I'm not doing wine events, etc., my main trade, where I make my money, if you like, is selling wine to restaurants, hotels, brasseries, cafes, whatever. And my world literally fell off a cliff. They were closed. I didn't have any business. My 95% of my business was selling to those people, those businesses. So first of all, my heart goes out to them. I'm very lucky. I love what I do, and in the main, I love the people I work with. Nothing gives me more pleasure than either doing wine events and talking to people like your good selves, or working with a chef in a privately owned restaurant and working out menus and tasting events and so forth. And they were closed, and in essence, so was I closed. And I've got to be honest with you, a week before lockdown, ironically, I was due to be in South Africa. I was being taken out there by a group of wine producers in South Africa to do taste new vintages, etc. Very kindly, I was looking forward to it, and of course that got canned. But one of the repercussions of that was that because I was going away for 10 days, I made sure that I had loads and loads of stock, and I'd stocked up my cellar so that when I got back, I could, obviously, there wasn't any issue supplying restaurants and hotels, and I had a very full cellar. And then suddenly I don't have any business. So I went from being a wholesaler looking down over a cliff without any business, and then suddenly I became a retailer. It was the most extraordinary thing, really. So I started sending out some emails with some offers of wines I had to the very small customer base that I don't have a shop or anything. And because of the situation everyone was living in, on a very local basis, we delivered wines, left it on people's front doors, or people would come and collect it literally from my house at a designated time, and they would collect it from me. It was quite extraordinary, to be honest with you. And the independent wine trade, me aside, the independent wine trade as a whole has had an extraordinary time of it. They haven't been able to sell to hotels and restaurants, but my goodness, from a retail perspective, I know there was people running around saying, "My God, there's no pasta, there's no toilet rolls, there's no tinned tomatoes," but wine was a very similar thing. People were desperate to make sure they had enough wine, And so the independent wine trade has probably benefited. It is one of the winners, probably. When you balance it all out, I'm not too sure that applies to me particularly, but certainly a independent retail shop, retail wholesaler, has probably done quite well out of this. The big question is what happens afterwards. Do people all go back again to what they were doing beforehand or not? I don't know the answer to that. I also don't know the answer to do restaurants, hotels, pubs fully open again. Is it ever the same again? Probably not. I don't know. I had an interesting conversation this week with a guy who looks after me from Bollinger Champagne. Bollinger own a distribution company in London called Mensendorf, and they don't just distribute Bollinger in the UK, they distribute a number of other wines as well, that Bollinger, a lot of them which have shares in those vineyards. And the guy said to me, he said, if I take champagne out of the equation, because obviously nobody's drinking champagne, very few people, because there's nothing to celebrate, but if I take champagne out of the equation, I'm 20% up on last year for my still wine sales. So it has been an amazing sort of roller coaster of a journey, really, as it has been for many industries. I get that completely. It's been really interesting. It's been really interesting to see what people drink to start with. When lockdown initially happened, people just wanted volume, they wanted cheap, they wanted volume, they just wanted to make sure they had enough. And then as it progressed a little bit, people said, well, we've got time on our hands, let's try this, let's try that. So it's been a very interesting time in the wine trade. I know that your next episode of virtual wine tasting, or from my home to your home, is a winemaker from South Africa who you all know from Luddite Winery, and of course in South Africa alcohol sales were completely banned, so it's a whole different thing. But in this country, it's been a very interesting journey. There are wines that I have had access to over the last 2 months that I haven't seen before, because they used to go to high-end restaurants in London, and suddenly there's magnums of this available and there's this wine available that's normally on allocation. So if you're a consumer, I'd say this to you: it's a good time. And I'm not just saying this with my sales hat on, but it's a good time because there's lots of offers and there's lots of wines that, generally speaking, have been going to the restaurant trade, and there isn't a restaurant trade. And even the restaurants and pubs and what have you are supposed to be opening up tomorrow. A lot of them aren't going to. This is going to continue for at least the rest of the year, in terms of the wine trade and where it sits. So it's a good opportunity to stock up your cellar because there's good prices. And there's some, there's magnums. I've seen magnums of wine I didn't even know that producers produced. And I've seen special cuvées of wine I didn't even know existed. So there's always a silver lining. I'm not too sure that I particularly would rather have not have had the silver lining, but there is a silver lining. Back to you, Roger.
Hi, thank you, Alistair. Well, there's a few questions coming through here. Right, how do you think you'll continue to source new wines in the future, given that there won't be exhibitions? Now, I know you maybe partly answered that earlier, but how difficult do you think it's going to be to actually get to the market and find out?
That element won't be difficult. That element, I did a virtual wine tasting about 6 weeks ago now, and I've done quite a few of them. But this particular one was really interesting because I sat here in Ryde on the Isle of Wight. The winemaker I was talking to was in northern Spain, was in a region called Rueda, which is south of Rioja, mainly known for white wines. And they sent over some samples to me beforehand, but even more than that, they sent over 3 different tank samples of the same wine. It was a Sauvignon Blanc, actually. It wasn't actually very good, but that's neither here nor there. But it was 3 different tank samples. One had been aged in stainless steel, one in a concrete vat, and one in an old oak barrel. And we all had 3 half bottles of this wine, and we kind of blended our own wine and did it with the winemaker as she sat there in glorious sunshine in Rueda. So I don't think sourcing wines is new wines is so difficult. What might be more difficult is getting consumers to try new wines, because obviously it's more difficult to get you to taste them. And I certainly, in the last 3-4 months, I've introduced only probably 3 or 4 new wines. It's not the time to start being clever and introduce a new wine that might not sell because of a buy-in and it doesn't sell. I don't have a restaurant to potentially put it on by the glass, etc. So I think it's more about how do I get new wines to the consumer rather than new wines to me.
Okay, well that's good, because that also follows on to the next question, which is how do you think? How is this affecting the producers? If the producers are going to, if you're thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not going to look too much for new stuff because of the risk. What effect do you think that's going to have on the producers, and what do you think is happening to the producers that you deal with and talk to on a daily basis?
I think it like anything, it depends who you speak to. Clearly, there's no restaurant market at the moment, and in all probability, there won't be will it ever get back to what it was? I've no idea. But so clearly, that's an avenue of wine sales that has been massively affected and will continue to be affected for quite some time yet. I read a report the other day that in South Africa, for example, potentially 80 producers might go out of business because of the way that their lockdown was affected. And bear in mind, there was no alcohol sales for a 4-week period. There was no exports either. So it does vary country to country. But clearly there are going to be some impacts that, like every industry, there are going to be some job losses, there are going to be some businesses closing. High end probably won't be affected at all because it's cachet. It's probably somewhere in the middle. I've seen a lot of agents in the UK delisting wines that were maybe slightly edgy wines, slightly funky wines, that they're more difficult to sell. So because they're more difficult to sell, we'll just sideline those for the moment. So of course those people will be affected, I think. Back to you, Roger.
Well, that's great, Alistair. Thank you for that. Interesting times ahead, but I think the one thing that's come out of the last couple of tastings is where probably we sat there worrying about what was going to happen to the trade. It seems to be a lot of positives for the future. So and through the last few months. So that's good news. That's good news. Right. So moving on, we're about to. If you guys would like to start getting ready with your red and canapes. However, before that, it's that competition time, and have we got one for you this month? So I'm actually dreading. I think I'm going to have to really watch what's going on here. So censorship is going to be the order of the day. I'll pass it over to Ian for the competition.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you're enjoying your evening. We got a photograph coming up for Capital competition that I just could not resist. And I'm sure when you see it, even though we used the same wine producers last time as we did this time, the photograph speaks for itself. And when you see it, as you can tell, it's a photograph I could not miss as a caption competition. I'm going to throw my own hat in the ring here, and this is my caption competition, and this is what I said. Where the hell did I wake up? So over to you guys. Captain competition into Rogers like last time. Neil's at his most majestic. Yeah, don't forget he's in the August. He's doing a virtual tasting in August. That's also we thought was a great link. But my captain competition. Where the hell did I wake up? Can anybody beat that? Take care.
I can't wait to get the answers, I have to say. In fact, I've got a feeling they might coming through. It might come through very soon. Right. Well, thank you, Peter Lewis Jones, for offering me the Grecian 2000. It's obvious that you're not using it anymore, so thank you for that. Great for the thank you. Right. Okay. So, if you, as I said, if you can start getting ready for the red wine. Those of you that haven't had any already, Mr. Roberts, and in the meantime, I'll just do a quick fill in just to let you know that we're one of the very, very few good things about what's happened is we've managed to get ahead for next year. Now, as you know, we put this program on the 2020 program with Moon and Phileas Fogg on hold. Hopefully, who knows, really hoping that we might be able to meet up before the end of the year. But if not, next year's program is actually now all together. We've had to change things around a bit, and obviously some people are available and some aren't. We've got a fantastic mix of new and old, and it's always good to bring some new people in. We've got some great new speakers, including Anthony Field Johnson, who I have a feeling is going to give us a cracking tasting. He's from Metzendorf and Co., who are owned by Bollinger. So I can see that evening selling out very quickly. And thank you to Chris Scarrett for sorting that one out. And then we've also got some back who we had to unfortunately put off this year. Eclectic Wines, Cat Brandwood. So the program is there. It is a really exciting program, and news of that coming out very, very soon. So hopefully in January we'll be back together. Right. In the meantime, we have got. I'm looking at a glass of red here. I'm itching to get stuck into. I haven't touched it yet, Andy Roberts, and I will also show you my canapes, which are chorizo and cheese. There's something missing there, you'll notice, but that's life. So over to you, Alistair.
That's the dog. The dog's life.
Okay, so thank you, Roger. The tale of your dog eating the chorizo goes with the territory, I'm afraid, on a tasting like this, I suppose, doing it at home. The last wine this evening is red, obviously, and I gave it the title of the wine that I couldn't have got through lockdown with, and that makes it sound like I drank this wine every day. I didn't, but I particularly like wines that tell a story. I particularly like the people that are behind a lot of the wine. I think one of the most interesting thing about wine is the people that make wine and the people involved. And this wine really appeals to me because of that. I unfortunately would have loved to have sat next to you or sat next to me this evening with a winemaker to talk about a wine. I couldn't do that, but I happen to know Luke, the winemaker at Glenelly, very well, and I'm delighted to say through the modern technology that we have, Luke has very kindly done a very short video that, through the wonders of our puppet master behind the scenes, we will now show to you. So this is Luke. He's the winemaker at Glenelly, and he's going to just tell you a little bit about Glenelly and a little bit about this wine. Thank you.
Hi Alistair, it's Luke here from Glenelly. Hope you're doing well. I'm just going to talk a bit about Glenelly. Glenelly is based in Stellenbosch. It's owned by the famous bastion of the Bordeaux wine industry, May de Lancassin, who came out here at the age of 78 and set up this beautiful estate. As I say, we're based in Stellenbosch, but this farm has been an old going concern since the French Huguenots, so it's quite nice that the history of the farm has come in a full circle to come back into French ownership with Madame de Lancassin. But we're going to speak about a wine here, the Estate Reserve 2013, and the Estate Reserve is a very important wine for us because it shares so many philosophies that we want to express on this property. I mean, the first one is that it's a blend, and we love blends on this property because we love to be able to layer flavors and textures of the different varietals coming through, much like if you're as an artist doing a painting, using different colors to build a very complex picture coming up. You do it with your different varietals of wine coming through. So this wine, it's not a traditional Bordeaux blend in the sense of what we see these days. It's more old school claret because we use a little bit of a Syrah in the blend with your Bordeaux varieties of Cabernet, Merlot, Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. It is a Cabernet base. So when you're tasting this wine, you've got all the nuances of the different varietals coming through, which lead to great complexity and interest on the palate. What's also important, and it's a big philosophy that we hold on the farm, is that you'll see vintage plays an important role for us. This is a 2013 vintage. It was a much cooler vintage, so the wine is a bit tighter, more classic in its style, whereas if you're looking at an upcoming vintage like a 2014, it's a bit more generous. And the reason why the vintage is so important for us is that that is the fingerprint of the farm and of the wine coming through, and it gives it its individuality. And it's so important for us to have that because it gives a lot of interest, especially when you're collecting these wines going forward. You'll be able to understand why one wine is like this and another one is slightly different. This wine, due to its blend, also makes it a great food wine because of that complexity. You can pair it up with a number of different dishes going through. And for me, it's a great wine for sommeliers, and I often say to them, it's your get out of free jail card because it is so complex going through. So on the nose, you've got the rich Cabernet characteristic coming through. There's some freshness and there's a bit of an elevated perfume, which comes from the Petit Verdot. And on the palate, you've got a sense of freshness coming through on it, which is very vibrant. Got a beautiful acidity, which is from the Cabernet Franc component. It just tightened everything up and given it a slight mineral backbone to it. But you've got this generosity and spice that's coming through from the Merlot and the Syrah. And it's a very intriguing and alluring wine because it keeps on developing in the glass and opening up, and that's what gives us great pleasure when we're drinking it, because you can drink this over a long period of time and see it evolving. So I hope you enjoy the wines and get as much enjoyment out of them as I do, and I wish you all the best. Cheers.
Shame. Obviously, at this point, I'd like to say cheers to Luke, and I hope all's well with him. I actually did speak to him this week. The irony for me is that as I said earlier, I should have been in South Africa in the middle of March. Never got there. Was going to go and see Luke. And actually, even more ironically, 4 weeks ago, he was due to stay at my house, and we were going to do a wine tasting at a restaurant up on the South Downs. But anyway, that's where we are. The reason I love this wine, and the reason why this is one of the wines that sort of made me think during lockdown, is that as Luke sort of mentioned there, Glenelly was founded in 2003. Before 2003, it wasn't actually a wine farm at all; it was a fruit farm. It was established by a French lady, Madame May de Lescang, and she was the owner of Chateau Pichon Land in Bordeaux. And if you know Bordeaux at all, Pichon Land is in Porliac. It's sort of near Le Tour, near Mouton Rothschild, near Lafite Rothschild. It's one of the super second growths. It's one of the great wines of the world. And at the age of 78, she was the owner of it, and she decided that at some point she was going to sell it. And what would you do at the age of 78 when you sold a property that is world famous? Of course, you'd take the money and you'd start all over again in Stellenbosch in South Africa. It's the most extraordinary story. She was 78 then. She's still going. She lives in Paris, but she goes to South Africa every quarter to check that they're doing what she wants them to do. And it's, in many ways, it's a story of starting again. From starting, from something that was very successful, one of the most, as I said, one of the most famous wines in the world, and then literally starting from scratch again. And it got me thinking that maybe that's what we're all going to be doing in many ways. We're kind of starting again in a brave new world, and she succeeded. And I really like this wine. It's not the top wine. The top wine of the estate it's called Lady May. It's a pure Bordeaux blend. This is their signature wine, as Luke just said. And the thing that's interesting about this wine is that it is a blend. It is a Bordeaux blend of predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, some Merlot, some Petit Verdot, and there is a little bit of Cabernet Franc in here as well. But they add about, depending on the vintage, and I think this vintage is, it's 15% Syrah, or Shiraz if you'd rather, to the blend, which you're not allowed to do in Bordeaux. But in the old days, in the 1870s, 1850s, 1860s, when it was a weak or a poor vintage in Bordeaux, when the fruit wasn't fantastic, a lot of properties in Bordeaux would buy grapes from the Rhone, so Syrah or Shiraz if you prefer, and bring them to Bordeaux and in essence beef up their wines with wines from their own valley. And there are still labels to be found from those days where the chateau would add the word Hermitage at the bottom. And nothing to do with Hermitage cellars, by the way, sadly, but from Hermitage in the Rhone Valley to signify that they had added some wines from Hermitage into their blend to beef it up. Now, clearly they're not allowed to do that anymore, but in the new world, you can do whatever you want when it comes to grapes. So, this is, old school, sort of based on a very famous Bordeaux chateau. And they've taken a decision just to produce a wine that sort of harks back to its historical roots. I think it's lovely wine. Luke's absolutely right. Every vintage is different. Tim Aitken rated this wine very highly. I think it's absolutely fantastic value for money. Of course, I'd say that, but with my press journalist hat on, I think this is fantastic value for money. I think this will develop. I opened this wine about an hour before we went live tonight, and it's developed in the glass all the time. But I also think you stick this in the cellar for another 5 years, it's going to develop beautifully. I love that you can get the Shiraz in the background. It has been aged in some oak barrels, but not overly oaked. It's just got lovely balance. It's still fresh. It's elegant. It's not a new world blockbuster. As Luke said, it's very food friendly. I don't know how many of you have done canapes this evening, but this will be great with some hard cheese. It's what I'm going to have after this is all over, by the way. I'm going to have some mature cheddar with this. And it would go lovely with some lamb on the barbecue or on the braai if you're in South Africa. It would go great with your Sunday roast. It is, as Luke said, a get out of jail card for sommeliers in the restaurant trade. I presume you've all got it in front of you, but I love the label. I just love the story. I think it's great wine, and I think it's drinking really well. This is the current release. It's 2013. How many vineyards do you know where the current release is 7 years old, which is fantastic. And this is an example. This vineyard is an example of where you as the consumer are benefiting, because Glenelly has suffered from a lockdown in South Africa where they weren't allowed to sell any wine on the domestic market. Exports were banned for 4 weeks, and then they were opened up again. Then they were closed down again, bizarrely. And so there's quite a lot of wine that they need to sell. They can't sell to the restaurant trade. So hence this is why this is on special offer at the moment. And I've got an offer coming out later this month with more of the range of Glenelly. They do a couple of wines beneath this wine, just slightly below, which are more just single varietals. So there's a Shiraz, there's a straightforward Cabernet Franc, there's a gorgeous unoaked Chardonnay. And it's an example of you as a consumer, how you're benefiting, or you can benefit. One of the few silver linings from this. So this to me is a wine that tells a story. It's great wine, amazing people, and as you could see there from the video where Luke was standing, certainly the weather's better there than it is in rainy, stormy old Ryde this evening, that's for sure. Cheers. Thank you. Roger.
Well done, Alistair. And another, well, that's 3 in a row. Cracking wines. That is really
Bingo.
nice. Would have been nice for Teresa, but there we go. So a few comments here about the film, actually. the treasurer says stunning scenery. So I expect the committee funds or the society funds will be heading that way for a while. How are we doing here? So lovely red. Love the video from Ali. Ali loved the video. Well done. So really good feedback there. If you could pass that back to the guys, that would be great. Right, a question here from Andy Preston. You partly answered it. The fact that Andy Preston sent this through when we were doing the rosé is a bit worrying. But you mentioned about it being a 2013, but how long would you say you could lay this down for?
It's always difficult with New World wines, to be brutally honest with you, because there's no real track record to sort of fall back on. So this estate didn't exist before 2003. It was planted in 2003, so they didn't really start making wines till 2006, 7, something like that. And if Luke was here now, which shame he's not, but he would admit to you that when they first started to produce wines, they didn't get it right. They'd planted some grape varieties in the wrong places, and it's really only in the last probably 4 or 5 years that Glenelly has really hit its straps. And getting a lot of sort of international praise. This wine in particular, I think it drinks very well now, providing you sort of give it some air beforehand. I would say, certainly 5 years in a cellar, and it's going to develop more. Depends how you like your wine, really. This is still got, it's obviously still got its sort of primary stuff going on. It's still lots of fruit. 5 years in the cellar, it's going to get a little bit more sort of vegetal, less fruit, more sort of meaty sort of aromas. I think it's, if I'm honest with you, I think it's so delicious now. Why wouldn't you drink it now?
And why not? You're quite right. I have to say, laying down wine in Selborne, I don't think happens very often, but there we go. Right, so a bit worried about Upper Selborne, actually, Alistair, because the feedback I've had there is, I love the wine logo. A lady riding as a rhinoceros side saddle. No reins. Well, there we go. I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to name the there, but that's rather worrying. So that doesn't happen in Lower Selborne, I must say. But right. So there we go. Alistair, that is 3 fantastic wines tonight. I'm sure I speak on everybody's behalf with that. That is wow. I can't wait to get into the other room and finish off if there's anything left next door to finish it off. So I'm just going to leave it to you for a minute just to finish off the tasting from your side and like a closing comment. And then we'll close out the evening. So I'll just leave it to you to finish off.
Thanks, Roger. This is all a bit odd because I've actually no idea how many of you are still with us. How many of you have left to go into another room? How many of you have now fallen over underneath the table, frankly? So it is a bit odd, but I thank you for your company. That sounds a bit odd, but thank you for your company. It's been a unique experience from my perspective in terms of hosting this tasting. I would like to thank, I'd like to thank my mother. No, I'd like to thank I'd like to thank Roger and Ian, obviously, and Chris for helping set this up, and obviously for distributing the wine. Nick, thank you so much for all the technology behind it. I'm a useless salesman. Those of you know me, from previous events at Selborne, I'm a totally useless salesman. So I'm just going to leave you with this. These wines are all on special offer. I can keep these wines on special offer for another week, 2 at the most, probably, before the next sort of lot comes out. We've kind of got a plan in place if people would like some more wine. I'm not entirely sure it will happen, in the next day or 2, but certainly we can sort it out. If you'd like some more wine, and here's the bit of the plan that we hadn't actually talked about, so I'm just going to make this up as I go along. If you'd like some wine, maybe just email Roger and then I'll pick it up from there, and then we'll make a plan from there. Again, thank you for your company. Thank you for everyone involved, and I'm going to have a very nice glass of Glenelly now with a piece of mature cheddar made on the Isle of Wight. Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks, Alistair. Well, funny enough, we're all going to have a very nice glass of Glenelly. So, yeah, you're with that. So, yes, certainly. If anybody wants to email me, if you'd like some more wine in the first instance, just send it through to the event at the Selborne Wine Society events at gmail.com address, and I will pass that on to Alistair. I'm sure the inbox will be full very shortly. So thank you for that. There we go. There's our second virtual tasting. Just to remind you that I think it's the date's gone out of my head. The 25th of August. 25th of August is the next tasting, and it is probably the next stage down the line. You've seen him in two of the caption competitions. God knows what he's going to wear for the tasting, but it's Niels Verberg, Bot Valley. So we shall be looking for a night from South Africa. We've had one across the water. We've got another one a little bit further away. So information coming out about that. But in the meantime, please get the orders in. Please get the feedback in on anything we can do to improve, excluding the Grecian 2000 Lewis Jones, and we'll take things from there. So, finish off. Ian, do you want to finish off?
Yeah, I do. Yes, please. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hello. Yeah. It's rare that I do this sort of announcement, but I think as a committee, and I think as a wine society, I think it's really, really important that we mark the passing of three of the wine society members who are sadly no longer with us: Anne Clark, Rosie Irwin, and Andrew Gibson. I think, by kind permission of Christine, we have two photographs of Andrew Gibson, a founder member of the Wine Society. So as the photographs come up, please raise a glass to all three: Anne, Rosie, and Andrew, absent friends. So everybody, raise a glass to absent friends. Absent friends. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thank you for your participation tonight. Look at the website. Roger will put it out this time. And we look forward to seeing you in August. And the ever effervescent Niels. So see you soon. Take care.
Cheers, everybody, and thank you again, Alistair. Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you.